Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel, click that notifications button, and get a notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk Ryan Garcia. He gave an hour-long interview, an intriguing interview with Teddy Atlas. I'm going to summarize a few of the things. You can check out the interview, of course, but I'll summarize a few of the things for you here. He spoke about Devin Haney. He said that they fought 6 times as kids, but as a sort of older period of their amateur career when they were teenagers, they fought 3 times. It's 2-1 to Devin Haney. He did say, however, that although it was 2-1 to Devin Haney, he seemed to imply that Haney sort of nicked his fights. And he said, over the 12 rounds, I didn't see anything that would concern me. In other words, I would break him down over 12 rounds. The one time Ryan beat him, he seriously hurt Devin Haney. According to him, he claims that he popped his ear, I think he said, or his earlobe, eardrum. I didn't say eardrum, I think he said earlobe, but he basically popped it. He said, he looked seriously hurt. He went back to his corner. His corner had confirmed that he was hurt. So yeah, he seriously feels as though, from what he says, as though he would have the beating of Devin Haney. When he spoke about Tank, he reiterated that Tank's too small to fight him, that he would need a Stairmaster to get close to him, something that he keeps talking about. He also said that Tank can only fight one way. He's going to come forward. What else is he going to do? And so it's nice and predictable, and he knows how to prepare for it. He's going to get on the back foot and box him. And if Tank does decide to get on the back foot, he will cut off the ring, close him down, and take him out. So he seems like a very confident kid. There's no fake humility when it comes to what he thinks of himself, whether he's talking about a fighter or whether he's talking about his looks. When Teddy Atlas said, you're more than just a good-looking face sort of thing, he didn't bat an eyelid. He was like, yeah, I know. It was just, yeah, I know, man. I'm pretty. It was that sort of approach he seemed to have. So he's very confident in that regard, but he seemed quite humble in other regards, in terms of he seemed quite willing to listen to Teddy when Teddy was discussing history and stuff like that, which I always find to be a very good sign. You look at guys like Anthony Joshua. He was carrying out film study the other day, looking at Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder as they prepare for their fight. Tyson Fury is often talking about history. Mike Tyson always spoke about history. A willingness to learn. For Lawrence Okolie, of course, who spoke to Hatman did a video recently where he spoke about how Okolie once messaged him and they spoke, and Okolie ended that conversation by saying, look, I don't want you to ever hold back with your critique of me or your analysis of me in any way just because I've reached out and we've spoken. That level of humility to want to continue to grow, I think, is an incredibly important trait for a fighter to have. So he was listening to Atlas, which I think is a really good thing. He was also he consistently and constantly mentioned being grateful to God. So this is a kid of faith. And I've always believed that fighters that are very faithful, they can find an inner strength sometimes. We saw it with Evander Holyfield. We've seen it with Tyson Fury. I feel as though it's something that he can draw strength from, and he seems to do that. He has a belief in himself. Now, I know he's also spoken about Floyd Mayweather. And one thing I will say, by the way, is that before I go into the Mayweather thing, he does come across as a lot younger than he actually is. Okay, so in post-fight, the Luke Campbell fight, I said that, he'd spoken to his fans and it's a great PR move, and he was saying things like, if your teachers ever doubt you. He's talking to the teenagers. He's not talking to the adult fans. He's not talking to guys that are in their 20s or 30s or 40s. He's talking to 14 to 17 or 18-year-olds. Well, I'm sure that's a great PR move, and he plays the game very well to be on Instagram. He was talking about how he can have 1 million views or on Instagram stories or whatever. So he's obviously very, very popular, and he plays the game very well. However, he did come across naturally as quite immature, quite young. I don't mean immature in an insulting way. I just mean he just comes across as quite young. So I'll give you an example. There was one joke he made where he goes, if you bet on Tank, you won't have money in the bank. And then he sort of jumped up and he was like, bye. He loved his joke so much, like it was this amazing thing he did. And he's like, jumping up and down. He's so excited, and he's constantly excitable. And you can see the way he speaks, the way he carries himself. He comes across like a kid who's 18, 19, 17, 18, 19. Now that could be a strength as well as a weakness when it comes to boxing. And we'll talk about that in a moment. First, let me tell you the quote he made about Floyd Mayweather, because it links to that. He said, Mayweather has always made it seem like he's done the most special things, when he really hasn't. To me, he didn't catch anybody where that fight was 50-50. Where was that? We've never seen that because he never took any. He played it smart. He squeezed every ounce of dollar he could rather than every ounce of greatness. To me, that's what was missing. And I'm going to do that. What he messed up on, I won't mess up on. Now that shows a couple of things from Ryan Garcia. Number one, he's not necessarily, although he was listening to Teddy and he was clearly interested in the past, he's not in awe necessarily of former great fighters. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing. It could show these guys aren't better than me. Why do I have to show reverence? But you need to learn from the greats of the past. You don't want to be too arrogant with it where you think, you know what, there's nothing these guys could do to teach me. You don't want that. But here's the other thing as well. Because he comes across as so, like I said, almost immature, you have to ask yourself, what does that youthful exuberance bring? It will bring certain strengths and it will bring certain weaknesses. He's talking here in a negative term, in a negative manner about manufacturing your path. Now, the other day, I was critical of him in the past video where I spoke about how he was talking about things like it's all about being the people's champion, Eddie Hearn. It doesn't matter who's got the belts. Well, that's almost the exact opposite of what he's just said now. Now, this might have just been something for the fans, just to throw out there, just to cause a bit of controversy. If he's clever and he knows how to play the game, that's what it might have been about. But if this is him genuinely talking, maybe he was being guided to say something else at the other, when he tweeted. You could end up seeing a situation where the fighter wants to fight everyone. He's promising, listen, Oscar De La Hoya and Al Heyman, they might not have there was this hint from Kent Rideout, who was the sort of host. He sort of said, look, what we're going to do with those two if they can't get on? How are you going to make the fight happen? And he said, I think he said Lupe Valdez, Lupe something. It was he said, I'm close with him and he can reach out to both parties. He's got good relationships with both people. Don't worry about it. These fights are going to happen. And he seemed confident and he seemed genuine when he was saying that. So it does look like he wants to make some of the big fights. I hope he wants to make all the big fights though, okay? But he did talk about Tank and he does seem to be wanting to go that way. With that youthful exuberance comes a lack of fear, okay? When you're 17, I want you to think back to when you were 15, 16, 17, 18, and you might have been getting up to crazy things. I know I was. Risky things where you think, what was I thinking? First of all, how did I get out of that alive? It might have left a great memory now, but what was I doing up there or doing that or whatever? You have a lack of fear. There's a lack of fear. There's a youthful exuberance. You feel invincible. You want to take on the world, okay? You want to achieve massive things. You've got dreams and you don't want to give up on those dreams. And you believe you will achieve them. There's no 16-year-old that sits there and dreams about what their life's going to be like and they sit there and they say, you know what, one day I'm going to struggle to make ends meet and I'm going to work 2 jobs to put food on my kid's table and hopefully I can develop some sort of friendly relationship with the mother of my children so that, we're not always fighting. Whoever says that? And yet that's the reality for a lot of people. When you're 16, 17, you're going to conquer the world. You're going to be a superstar athlete. You're going to be a superstar singer, Hollywood actor, a millionaire. By the time you're 30, you're going to retire. You're going to be on a yacht in Greece. You're going to be partying in Miami. You're going to be doing all these things, right? That's fearlessness. That's youthful exuberance. So when he talks of Floyd Mayweather, he's not afraid. He's not intimidated. I'm going to do better than Floyd. That's how he thinks. Now, he doesn't realize how amazing what Floyd achieved actually was. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of what he says is very, very accurate. Let's be real. It doesn't mean Floyd wouldn't have beaten a lot of the great fighters he didn't fight in their prime. If he'd fought them in their prime, he may very well have. But let's not pretend that Floyd wasn't a master at the timing of fights. He had a 6-fight deal to fight Canelo Alvarez. He had a 6-fight deal with Showtime. He could have fought Canelo Alvarez on that 5th fight, one before Pacquiao, the final big fight, say. Okay? Instead, he fought him in his 2nd fight. Why? Because Canelo was still young and green. So he wanted to catch him on his way up. And he injected that extra little clause when it came to weight draining him, essentially, make him fight 152 pounds rather than 154. Why will I wait another 2 years for Canelo to continue his ascent? No, I'll take him early. But then yet with other fighters, he took them when they were a bit past their best. The Pacquiao fight, whatever your position is on that, Pacquiao wasn't at his best anymore. Amir Khan, who, whatever you say about his glass chin, Floyd wasn't a puncher. Would he have been able to expose that glass chin? Well, Floyd was a pot-shotting, sharp-shooting counterpuncher. A pot-shotting, sharp-shooting counterpuncher with range and reach. He doesn't want a guy who's taller than him, who throws the speed and volume that Amir Khan does, who's in and out. So he might jump in with 2-3 shots, even if you in lightning speed, and even if you deflect them, he then gets out, and you're sitting there having to try and time him on the way in. Danny Garcia was getting out completely outboxed, but he managed to time Khan and knocked him out. Well, Floyd doesn't have that Danny Garcia power. So what happens if that fight had been fought? Now the people, when he put it to a poll, who shall I fight next? Maidana or Khan? The people voted Khan. He fought Maidana twice. Then people asked, he asked again the people, what's going to happen now? People were saying, yeah, you've got to fight Amir Khan. He fought Andre Berto. Now, this is not to say he would have lost necessarily to Amir Khan. We know Floyd had the ability to change things up. He might have walked him down. It's not the first time he walked fighters down. He might have found a way, but it would have been a tough fight. And he always knew who to fight when. He was a master of it. Now, it's easy to criticize Floyd for that as fight fans. But you've had a lot of fighters, great fighters, okay? Great fighters who fought for the glory, who fought for the greatness, every ounce of greatness, as Ryan Garcia says. And how did they turn out, guys? Now, some of them, of course, sailed off into the sunset. Thank God. You've had some great fighters. Look at Lennox Lewis out there doing his thing, great fighter. But you've also had many that fought for every ounce of greatness and ended up with serious neurological problems, perhaps the greatest in Muhammad Ali. So Floyd always spoke about how I would leave this sport with my faculties intact. David Haye always said, my dream is to... David Haye went on further than he promised. He promised he'd retire, I think at 30, he said. But whatever the case, he said 33. He said he'd retire with his faculties intact, and he always spoke about the importance of having his faculties intact. Ryan Garcia isn't planning along those lines. He's not thinking, I want to manufacture my way, get some titles, make a legacy and make lots of money and get out at the right time. Anthony Joshua's come out recently and said 5 more years, then I retire. He's not thinking like that. Ryan Garcia is thinking, I want to take every ounce of greatness out of this. This is what he's saying, at least. Things can change. Things can change. You can reevaluate. Because one thing that happens to a lot of people that have youthful exuberance, when they take these risks and they feel invincible, if something tragic befalls on them, often they reset and revalue everything about their lives, and they change and they prioritize differently. You know how many people I know, I don't have kids, but I've got friends that have got kids. These guys were nuts growing up. They would get up to the craziest stuff. Now, although they still have it in their heart, they still adrenaline junkies, they don't do certain things because they've got young children. And they're worried, if something was to happen to me for my stupid behavior, I'm going to leave my kid behind. Now that can manifest itself in the ring too. The risks you're willing to take. How much of a beating are you willing to take? Your orbital bone, you think it's gone. Paulie Malignaggi, when his orbital bone was broken against Miguel Cotto, he hung in there. Heroic, really, without that punching power to turn the fight around in an instant, and he still hung in there. And he started to turn that fight around. And then the wrappings got undone on I think it was Paulie's glove, on one of the two gloves, it was Paulie's glove, and there was a delay. Cotto went back, looked at his corner, was able to regroup, and the fight turned, it swung in his favour again. And he won the fight on points. But the fact of the matter is, he had a broken orbital bone. That's a serious injury. You could potentially lose your eyesight. Well, what if Paulie was 35 instead of the young man that he was, and he had children? He might have packed it in a little bit earlier. Do you see what I'm saying? So I want to know what you guys think about Ryan Garcia's mindset. For the time being, it seems to be brilliant. This youthful exuberance. Is he delusional, though? Is there this thing of, I want to squeeze every ounce of greatness? Is he going to have to be reined back? And if so, is that totally normal? You want your fighter at the end of the day to be sitting there and thinking, I can take on the world. You don't want him to be thinking from now, I want to get out and, protect myself and make good money. Because with that mindset, you're never going to be a champion. You need to be a winner. You need to be a winner. But what do you make of his criticism of Floyd? What do you make of it? What does it say about his mindset? What does it say about him and his aims moving forward? Thanks for watching, everyone. God bless. Chat to you soon.